Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something pretty fundamental in religious thought.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It's this difference between, mistakes we make without meaning to, and those acts where we, deliberately choose defiance.
Intention versus defiance. That's a big one.
Exactly. And we're looking at it through a personal diary entry from Rodgery, dated April 26th, 2025.
Oh.
It's titled, Relying on Christ's Atonement to be Forgiven by God Without Despising God. Quite a title.
It certainly sets a theme.
It does. And it grapples specifically with a passage from the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verses 22 through 31.
Numbers 15, right? That's laying down some laws for the Israelites, isn't it?
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission really is to understand the distinction Rodgery is drawing here between these, let's call them unintentional slip-ups, which, have a path to atonement.
Okay, way to make things right.
And then these other acts, the purposeful disobedience ones, that seem to carry a much heavier spiritual weight, according to this reflection.
Got it. So unintentional errors versus deliberate defiance, based on Numbers 15 and this diary entry. Let's dig in.
Okay, so that specific passage, Numbers 15.2231, what's the setup there?
Well, you're right. It's part of instructions given to a new generation of Israelites. They're basically getting the rules for worship, for how to live in relationship with God as they enter this new phase.
Crown rules for a fresh start, kind of.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And right in there, the text makes this, very clear distinction between different kinds of wrongdoings.
Yeah, it draws a line in the sand.
It really does. It separates how different actions are viewed and, crucially, how they're dealt with.
So Rodgery's diary really focuses on these two types. First up, these errors.
Right.
The diary defines them as mistakes that happen, and I'm quoting loosely here, because of fleshly weakness or inner ignorance.
So not intentional rebellion, more like stumbling.
Exactly. Times when we don't fully get it or maybe aren't paying close enough attention, we miss the mark unintentionally.
It acknowledges human limitation then. Weakness, ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Things that aren't necessarily malicious, but still result in not aligning with God's will.
Right. You didn't fully obey, maybe didn't even realize you weren't obeying completely.
But even these unintentional errors, they still cause a problem,
Yeah.
right? According to the text in the diary.
They do. The diary points out that they disrupt the relationship with God. There's still a consequence, a sort of separation that happens.
Even if you didn't mean it. Interesting. So what's the fix?
Well, that's where atonement comes in.
Yeah,
For the whole community messing up unintentionally.
the whole group.
Yeah. The scripture lays out a specific remedy, Rodgery notes it, offering a young bull as a burnt offering,
Okay, a significant offering.
plus grain and drink offerings, and also a male goat as a sin offering. It's quite detailed.
It is detailed. The burnt offering signifies a complete surrender, maybe, acknowledging the falling short.
And the sin offering, the goat.
That seems to be about purification, cleansing the community from that unintentional defilement, you could say.
And there's a key figure involved.
The priest, the high priest specifically. The diary highlights this, right?
Yes, the priest performs the atonement for everyone, for the whole congregation.
And the result is forgiveness.
That's the promise. Forgiveness follows that atonement process.
Now, Rodgery connects this ancient ritual to something else, doesn't he?
He does, and this is where it gets really interesting for, later belief. The diary draws a direct line to Jesus Christ.
As the ultimate high priest.
Exactly. Pulling from the book of Hebrews, which talks about his one sacrifice covering sins once and for all.
Making people holy through that single offering. A very different scale.
Completely. And the diary stresses this isn't just a historical event.
Right. Not just a one-and-done thing in the past.
No, it's something to continually rely on. For forgiveness, for renewal, day to day.
Because we keep making those unintentional mistakes.
Precisely. We're always capable of slipping up, so the idea is we constantly need to access that forgiveness through Christ's sacrifice to restore the relationship.
That makes sense. It shifts the mechanism from repeated animal sacrifice to ongoing reliance on a past definitive act.
And Rodgery also mentioned something about inclusivity here.
Oh, regarding the atonement.
Yeah, this provision, this way back for unintentional errors, wasn't just for the Israelites.
It applied to others, too.
It did, to non-Israelites living among them. The diary points this out.
That's significant. It suggests the principle of forgiveness for these kinds of errors, when acknowledged, is maybe broader, more universal.
It definitely hints at that, doesn't it? That God's forgiveness isn't necessarily confined by ethnicity, at least for these unintentional situations.
It seems to recognize a shared human condition of sometimes getting it wrong without meaning to.
And what about individuals if just one person messed up unintentionally?
Oh, the diary covers that too, based on the scripture. The process was slightly different, but parallel.
How so?
An individual would offer a year-old female goat as a sin offering.
A female goat this time.
Yes. And again, the priest steps in to make atonement for that specific person.
So there were mechanisms for both community and individual restoration from these errors.
Exactly. A structured way back into right relationship.
Okay, so that's unintentional errors. But then there's the other side of the coin.
Deliberate defiance.
Right.
Yeah, the tone definitely shifts here.
It does. Rodri uses this term, o ahai aroini, acting presumptuously.
Presumptuously. That sounds like arrogance, pride.
That's exactly how the diary explains it, stemming from inner pride, knowingly opposing God.
Like shaking your fist at heaven almost.
Yeah, the original Hebrew implies raising one's hand against God, deliberately resisting his words, his commands, willful rebellion.
It's not a mistake. It's a conscious choice, a rejection of authority.
And this state, this proud disobedience, is labeled blasphemy.
Right. Rodri defines it as mocking God, denying his authority outright.
So why is this treated so much more severely than the unintentional errors?
The diary digs into the reasons given in the text. It's because the person despises the words of the Lord. Despises, that strong language, looking down on, scorning.
Exactly. And they break the commands of the Lord. The sense is shattering, destroying what God set up.
So it's the attitude behind the action, the contempt, the deliberate destruction.
That seems to be the core issue. It's fundamentally different from stumbling in weakness or ignorance.
And this is where the path diverges, isn't it? Atonement covered the unintentional.
But not this. The diary emphasizes that this kind of deliberate, prideful defiance doesn't receive that same promise of atonement.
The act itself, the despising and breaking, seems to cut off that possibility.
So what happens then? What's the consequence?
It's stark. Yeah. Rodri points out the scripture says the consequences of that sin fall squarely on the person.
No communal covering, no priestly intervention in the same way.
No. And they are to be cut off from the people of Israel.
Cut off. Wow. That's complete separation. From the community, from the covenant relationship.
It's a very severe judgment, reflecting the seriousness of deliberately rejecting God's authority and word.
And does Rodri connect this to the New Testament as well?
Yes. Just like with the atonement part.
Yes.
The diary brings in that passage from Hebrews again.
The one about sinning deliberately.
Exactly. Hebrews warns that if someone deliberately keeps sinning after they've received the knowledge of the truth,
then what?
Then no sacrifice for sins is left.
Oof. That sounds final.
It's presented as incredibly serious. Rodri interprets this as being parallel to the Old Testament defiance. It's like despising Christ's redemption.
How so?
The interpretation is that it's like trampling the Son of God underfoot, treating the covenant blood Christ sacrifice as unholy, insulting the Spirit of grace.
Actions that carry immense spiritual weight, leading towards, well, destruction according to that view.
Yes. It paints a picture of someone who has understood the truth and the offered grace, but then consciously turns against it in contempt.
Okay, so bringing this all together, how does Rodri apply these ancient ideas personally today?
Well, the diary acknowledges that, we still mess up unintentionally in thoughts, words, actions. We don't always live up perfectly to what we believe.
That human fallibility again.
Right. But the real warning, the sharp edge in the reflection, is against letting that slip into persistent pride. Willfully ignoring guidance we know is right.
So avoid that presumptuous attitude.
Exactly. The diary stresses the need to keep relying on Christ's atonement for the everyday, unintentional failings,
while actively avoiding that defiant stance, that despising of God or his guidance.
It's a call for humility, really, and constant vigilance against pride taking root.
Does Rodri give an example?
Yes, a very practical one from discipleship training.
Oh, like what?
Communication issues. Unintentional misunderstandings cropped up, leading to negative feelings. You know how easily that can happen, right?
Oh, absolutely. Even with the best intentions, wires get crossed, feelings get hurt. It's very relatable.
Totally. And what's insightful is how Rodri processed these unintentional communication errors.
How? Did they just brush it off?
No, not according to the diary. The approach was to rely on God for correction to see where they might have contributed unintentionally, and then seeking forgiveness through that lens of Christ's atonement, applying the principle directly to interpersonal friction.
So, using that framework of unintentional error, needing atonement and grace, even in everyday relationships.
Precisely. It shows how these theological concepts aren't just abstract ideas, but can be a practical tool for navigating relationships and seeking restoration.
And the diary concludes with this.
It wraps up by emphasizing that ongoing need for prayer, for relying on Christ's atonement, especially within that discipleship context.
To handle the inevitable bumps in the road.
Yeah, to deal with the interpersonal friction that naturally arises and to maintain unity. It's a recognition that even when trying to do good, we still falter, and grace is the constant need.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the core distinction really stands out, doesn't it?
It really does. That sharp contrast between the unintentional missteps, which disrupt things but have a path to restoration through atonement and forgiveness.
Right, a path back.
And then the deliberate, pride-fueled defiance, that conscious rejection of guidance which, in this framework, closes that door and brings severe spiritual consequences.
Yeah. Roger's reflection really hammers home the need for humility, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Hey.
Humility, a constant reliance on grace or sacrifice for our failings, and the critical importance of not hardening our hearts into defiance, not despising the guidance we're given.
It definitely leaves you thinking.
It does. And maybe a final thought for you listening.
Okay.
How do you, in your own life, sort of navigate that line between mistakes you make without meaning to and choices you make deliberately, knowing perhaps they go against your own principles or beliefs?
That's a good question. What are the implications of each in your own life, your own sense of integrity, maybe even your relationships?
Yeah, thinking about that difference, unintentional versus deliberate, and what follows from each. It's definitely something worth pondering.